Since it's not a guarantee that Penn State is going to land Rocco Becht from Iowa State, it might be in the Nittany Lions' best interest to also pursue a familiar friend.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are locked on to Penn State football. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. My name is Seyko, and I am your host of the show, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcasting network out there. And help me welcome back Andrew Kalista, former television anchor. He's now the host of the White Tailgate podcast. He's been covering Penn State football, Penn State sports for 16 years, as we are going to break down another key player entering the transfer portal, AJ Harris, adding to Chaz Coleman, Elliot Washington. Just what does it mean for Penn State with these departures? The way that it's been described to me, a tug of war is emerging between Penn State and USC for coveted defensive coordinator D'Anton Lynn. But we got to start with Penn State possibly pursuing Beau Pribula to come back to Happy Valley. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. So, Andrew, we're going to talk about Penn State's quarterback dilemma in general, because I've laid out that they have options. Okay, you have the option to go get Rocco Becht, but that's not a slam dunk. That's not a guarantee. There are going to be other schools that are pursuing him. Beau Pribula, part of this is also has to do with the fact that he's changed his social media around to reflect that, hey, I was a Penn State football player once upon a time. I think it's definitely worth pursuing Pribula because you have uncertainty with Ethan Grunkemeyer not potentially wanting to stay, and it's not a guarantee that you're going to land Rocco Becht over from Iowa State, and you need a quarterback.
Those are all great points. They're all 100% right, Zach, as well. And to be honest with you, if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, the quarterback position, you kind of feel like if you're a Pittsburgh Steelers fan and Penn State fan, it's like, oh my God, I'm living in the same world that I've been in rotating for
simulation,
like 3-4 years out in Pittsburgh. From Penn State's perspective, it's definitely worthwhile because in this era of free agency, and that's what it is, it's free agency, friends with benefits, the familiar person is always going to be that kind of like security blanket where it's easy to go out and make that contact. You know what it's about. So you already have a foot in the door. Yeah. And Penn State right now has two of those candidates in Rocco Becht, whether he wants to come east or not, and Beau Pribula, if he wants to come back. Obviously, Beau Pribula's connection to Penn State goes deep with his family. I saw him play in high school with Central York. Maybe if he comes back, maybe he'll put a number 1 on his jersey like he wore in high school. Heck, I'll throw something out there. Maybe he's saying, hey, I'll play safety coming back to Penn State if he wants to. No, that's not going to happen. But the kid did play really good safety for the Panthers. But it's all about that familiarity. And with Penn State, you don't know what Ethan Grunkemeyer is going to do. So you have to have coals in the fire. It sucks if you're a player who's committed to the team because coaches really can't take you as being committed. And then if another school comes along and says, hey, we're going to offer you this, and it's more than what Penn State's offering, well, chances are it's going to be see you later, and Penn State's caught out to dry, and they have nobody in the quarterback room all of a sudden that they trust. So I kind of like refer to Beau Pribula. It's kind of like, a friend with benefit because you're so familiar with him, kind of, talking like the kids talk. You're kind of so familiar with him. And it's the same thing with Matt Campbell's guy coming from Iowa State. They're familiar, but there's no guarantee that either one's going to end up at Penn State. In theory, you could get two. In theory, you could have Grunkemeyer, Pribula, and Matt Campbell's guy all at the same time. And guess what? That's what they are. They're theories. And everything is great in theory, like communism. It just always doesn't pan out that way.
And one of the things that I take away from this is the fact that Penn State's schedule, they can succeed with any of them. Time will tell which one. Well, I guess we'll never know because we're never going to see all of Rocco Becht, Beau Pribula, and or Ethan Grunkemeyer in a Penn State uniform at the same time to be able to compare and contrast. But I think that Penn State can win with Beau Pribula being the starter. I think that Penn State can win a lot of games with Rocco Becht being the starter. I think Penn State can win a lot of games with Ethan Grunkemeyer being the starter. It's which direction do you want to go in? And I like Ethan Grunkemeyer a ton. If we're doing a one-to-one comparison between who should Penn State keep, Grunkemeyer, Pribula, or Becht, you're only getting Rocco Becht and or Beau Pribula for 1 season. You get Grunkemeyer for 3. But here's the complex issue and why I say it might actually be more beneficial for Matt Campbell and Penn State for the future to go with the Oregon plan, if you will, where they got Dillon Gabriel as that veteran, and then they had Dante Moore come in and sit behind him for a year. Well, I can't see Grunkemeyer. I mean, maybe it's in the cards. Maybe it is, where they're able to convince Grunkemeyer to be QB2 again and then dial him back to spring him forward after Becht, or you create a quarterback competition and Grunk maybe beats out Rocco Becht or Beau Pribula. My point being is that you would kind of have to compromise the depth chart if you go and stick with Ethan Grunkemeyer. Now, you could get that journeyman veteran quarterback out of the transfer portal. Michigan's done it. Ohio State's done it. But it's not easy to do. You have to basically pay someone a chunk of NIL money to say, you're going to be the backup. There's no competition here for Ethan Grunkemeyer. And someone said, well, that's a good idea when you're a national title contender, which Penn State isn't going to be, at least right out of the gate. So I like Grunkemeyer, and I think he has more upside, and you have the 3 years of eligibility, but what about the QB depth chart behind him? You get Beau Pribula, you get Rocco Becht. You also go and recruit the QB of the future to be that quarterback too for that next season for 2026.
Yeah, and that's a scary outlook too if you're Penn State, because if you're expecting a freshman to come in and be that guy 2 years down the road, that's a scary proposition for a school that wants a national championship and they want immediate results. Heck, Pat Crap has said he wants a national championship, and that's what is to be expected. So I know everybody's caught up in the Indiana mold right now. That's not the rule. That's the exception to the rule. I like how you laid it out with Oregon and how they did it. I mean, that's more of a building block type of things, and Oregon is trying to build to that national championship. Obviously, they were number 1 seed last year. Then they got freight trained by Ohio State in a terrible seeding job by the committee. But when you think about it, it's Penn State has a max ability with Rocco Becht or Beau Pribula. We don't know what Penn State's max capability is with Ethan Grunkemeyer, because we've seen him take a lot of big incremental steps as this season went on. So in terms of building out, maybe it's the third year of Matt Campbell that Penn State truly pushes with a senior Ethan Grunkemeyer as a national championship contender. Maybe it's junior year with a year and a half of starting stuff. Those are all intriguing options. And yet at the same time, it's, man, if I could get the legs of Beau Pribula and get him back into Penn State and bring some of that leadership skills that he's displayed and that fire that he brings to the field, maybe next year isn't a 9-win max season. Maybe it is a 10-11 win max season, and boom, you're instantly in the playoffs and anything could happen. At the same time, the familiarity with the offense that Matt Campbell's going to run with Rocco Becht, that security blanket, maybe it's, hey, you come in here, you're going to be elevated by the talent that's here at Penn State and the talent that we bring in here. And then, bam, you're in the national championship. There are no wrong arguments. I argue from the side of Ethan Grunkemeyer as a comfort thing, because that's always been my style of building out a program. It's hard for me to adjust to this new world a little bit of free agency, but at the same time, it's done in the NFL every single year. So it's just a little bit different because you're not dealing with professionals and contracts. You're dealing with a lot of, the whims of 18 to 22-year-olds, which makes it a little bit scary.
Dealing with the whims of their agents. That's really where this sport is dictated by these unknown, these shadow agents that are making insane commissions. So we can't guarantee who Penn State's going to ultimately get between Rocco Becht. The blueprint is there for all of them. Becht, Pribula, Grunkemeyer. I think Penn State can win 8+ games with any of them next season. Mm-hmm. The one thing I will guarantee here, I'll go on the record and say this, Beau Pribula and Ethan Grunkemeyer in particular, whichever one, maybe it's both of them, don't end up at Penn State. One of them is ending up at Virginia Tech. I can guarantee that much.
Okay. I don't think Beau is ending up at Virginia Tech. I said that on my podcast with Frank Bonanni and Mike Rose, because he came in here, was promised to be used as Trace McSorley, and there was never really a plan developed to have that happen. And he pretty much was relegated to the backup, got thrown in there, no congruent plan, no nothing. If I'm Beau, I ain't trusting that ship to sail ever again. I'm just not. I got one more year of college football.
I make the most of it.
I want to be in a program where I know how I'm going to be used and I'm going to be fully trusted. And I don't see Beau taking that leap of faith. No inside information on that.
Perspective.
It's you sat behind Drew Aller for your time here at Penn State. Drew Aller didn't light it up in blue-white games. Drew Aller didn't light it up against primetime competition at Penn State, and you were never really given the chance to go and light it up against the bigger team. Like out in Columbus in the shoe 3 years ago, supposed to be a package for Beau Pribula, doesn't see the field. Drew Aller sophomore year, doesn't see the field. That's concerning to me. And if I'm Beau, you didn't trust me before. Why am I trusting you now?
Well, I completely understand that. Beau Pribula not wanting to be in a tug of war in his final season of his collegiate career. Now who's in a tug of war? D'Anton Lynn between Penn State and USC. There is a battle for USC to retain D'Anton Lynn, for Penn State to try to get him away from Southern California. We're going to discuss what's going on there with the battle for D'Anton Lynn. That's coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the college football season. Tailgates, packed stadiums, being right in the middle of all the action. The energy, the bands, the moments you remember forever. But actually getting tickets, that part used to be frustrating. Long queues, logins, prices jumping at checkout. That's why Gametime gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing college football tickets and experiences in just a few taps. You can open up the Gametime app, look at upcoming college football games, choose your favorite team, choose a game you want to go attend, and you'll be surprised how fast it was to find great seats. The app is incredibly easy to use, user-friendly interface. You can go from browsing to buying tickets in just minutes. You will love being able to see, this is one of the best features, being able to see the view from your seat before you go to buy. So you know exactly what you're getting for your point of view. You got zone deals. You pick a section, Gametime will pick the seats, but you save even more money. You can take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That is code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And again, thank you so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network out there. If you haven't already, go check out our all-new Everydayer Club. If you're not familiar with it yet, what is the Everydayer Club? Well, the Everydayer Club gives you inside access to Locked On Nittany Lions. You get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Nittany Lions, and it's compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and every other major podcasting app. You also will get an invitation to a members-only Locked On Everydayer Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of the show. Go to LockedOnNittanyLions.supercast.com, or you can tap the link in the show notes to learn more and sign up for the Everydayer Club. Oh, it's a battle for D'Anton Lynn. USC is not going to go down quietly, and Penn State really wants their primary target here. It's been described to me right now as a tug of war, that USC is trying to do everything that it can, because this is why it hasn't happened. Normally you see these reports, these situations, when a target emerges, when 24/7 on 3 put out the report that, hey, a target has emerged for XYZ program, usually a deal gets done relatively quickly. So, this report came out a few days ago. Lynn should end up at Penn State in the next 24 to 48 hours, right? Well, no, we're in the middle of Christmas week here, and Lynn is still not at Penn State. So what gives? What's the holdup? Well, USC doesn't want their defensive coordinator to be poached by a team now literally within the Big Ten Conference. So this is a direct opponent here. It's one thing to go to another program that's not going to have an impact on you, but that's not the case here with Penn State. So Penn State, I don't know if they expected this kind of resistance. This is the second year in a row that they pursued Lynn. Andrew, here's what I find interesting is the fact that it seemed like Lynn had no issue saying no to Penn State last time around, got an extension, got a raise, got more guarantees. But this time, again, there's a little more tug and pull. There's a back and forth to it. So why do we think that Lynn is willing to say yes this time around, but was quick to say no last year?
Well, I think because last year it was like he just made the switch from UCLA to USC. And I think, even though we see dynamics changing constantly in the world of college football now, there's something to go from jumping ship here to here to here without letting it play out at least a little bit. So I think that may played a part in it last year. Who did the D'Anton Lynn play for at Penn State?
Joe Paterno.
He didn't jump ship, did he? So there's where, what kind of influence? Tom Bradley was his coach. He didn't jump ship. So maybe that influences. His dad, coached in the NFL, didn't jump ship, was always on the hot seat out in San Diego, didn't jump ship, didn't kind of look for better things. So maybe that has something to do with it. If and also, we don't know all the actual offers. Was that bait to get Jim Knowles, stuff like that? If D'Anton Lynn is upset that he didn't get the Penn State job last year and it's spun as I'm staying at USC, if a used car salesman reneges on a deal when you go back to the dealership after you get your loan at the bank, are you going to be upset and you're not going to go and buy another used car? No, you're just going to go to another dealership. Well, that salesman's gone from Penn State. It's a whole new salesman there. So, and people could read between the lines. We don't have to read between the lines. I just threw it right out there. So, I don't think that there's any animosity between I didn't get the job here, I didn't get the job there, because it's a totally different person. It comes down to, does Lynn want to work for Matt Campbell or does he want to work for Lincoln Riley? And that's what he's going to have to decide. At the same time, how hot is that seat out at USC for the head man out there? Lincoln Riley, again, not in the playoff. Had a chance to make a win, put himself into conversation, came up short. Defense was a problem for the Trojans for a long time. Lynn, they've been getting progressively better, but they're still not there. Yeah. I got to tell you, that seat's a heck of a lot cooler at Penn State than it would be out in Southern California. And it has nothing to do with global warming or the climate.
Here's let me throw my 2 cents at the situation with Lincoln Riley. He's always been a guy. I don't expect Matt Campbell. So this extends to Matt Campbell and his stability at Penn State. If things go well and Matt Campbell has the buy-in from the university, you're getting that back. You're getting that commitment back from Matt Campbell. I don't expect him to leave, actually. I expect him to be at Penn State for the next 20 years, unless you put together multiple 2-10, 3-9 seasons, which I don't expect at all. But I think Matt Campbell's going to be a lifer. So if D'Anton Lynn wants to, if he's worried about stability and everything, Lincoln Riley, his agent, we know this for a fact, had linked him to the Penn State job. Was that to get more money? Was that to get guarantees? Was that to scare USC? Was that because, there were a lot of rumors this cycle that, hey, keep an eye on Lincoln Riley. He could end up at Florida. Now his name's in the mix at Penn State. Watch him for LSU. So if everything's so great at USC and they're trending in the right direction, but Lincoln Riley's ready to move on from that, something doesn't add up. Something's not right there. So if you're looking for the more stable job or the more stable setup, it's definitely going to be Matt Campbell in Penn State, because Lincoln Riley could be here today and gone tomorrow.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, somebody posted from Oregon, they posted 10 win seasons over the last 20 years or 25 years, Oregon to USC, and Oregon's up there. USC, you have to go back to 1985 to like get the, I'm not sure of the exact stats, but something like in the 80s to like equal Oregon. And with NIL, it just has completely changed. Tax brackets for these kids have completely changed on where those things at. And when USC, every time they've had success, it was followed up by a probation pretty much. Like you could kind of like see the ebbs and flows. Well, now everybody's allowed to do what put USC on probation. So there's an element of that. So maybe USC's glory days are kind of, in the past, and they got to find a way to chart, through this new territory. And I don't think Lincoln Riley's the guy. If he was the guy, I think we would have seen more success. He had a Heisman Trophy winner, laid an egg in a bowl game, in 2023. So there's things out there that if you're doing D'Anton Lynn and you're thinking, how stable is my environment? There's a lot of concern out there in California.
There's definitely concern overall from USC, and at least the last time that Lincoln Riley spoke publicly that we saw right when he was asked directly about it. Is D'Anton Lynn going to be here? Is going to be the defensive coordinator? What should we expect? This is from the USC, the media apparatus. Mm-hmm. And he says, well, it basically says we're going to have to wait and see. It's out of our control, basically inferring that the decision is up to D'Anton Lynn. If you want to be here, you'll be here. If you want to leave, the door's right over there. So the decision is up to D'Anton Lynn. And I kind of understand that. You got an extension last year and everything. This isn't trying to point the finger at D'Anton Lynn, but USC probably feels like we've already done enough to try to keep you here. If you want to go back to your alma mater, it's just kind of tough at that point. I get the sentimental part. So I'm kind of expecting D'Anton Lynn to end up at Penn State because I'm not entirely sure what the backup plan is. I imagine a couple names will reemerge or start to emerge. Maybe they have John Heacock step in for one season and then retire, go into the senior analyst role, and then pass the baton to somebody else. But I don't even want to get to that point. D'Anton Lynn is the only choice for Penn State, in my opinion.
One guy, and I haven't checked in the last 3 days, but he's always popped up, is Elijah Robinson. And that's another Penn State alum. I'm not sure of the fit. I'm not sure of the style, but he's always had a name mentioned. And I think he was just going to LSU to coach defensive line, but I don't think that actually ended up taking place.
No.
That got shuttered, but he was the favorite to take over the LSU defensive line coach. Am I correct?
Yeah. And then it became back to Texas A&M. So he's been connected to a bunch of different jobs. And, he's been connected to Penn State in the past. Maybe it doesn't pan out that he's back at Texas A&M. Maybe that it's happy, but maybe there's just light out in the corner of his eye that says, well, if this job's open at Penn State, I'd like to go back. So we don't know. That's always a possibility. And I just throw that name out there because it's one that's always up every single cycle. And it's intriguing from a Penn State standpoint because no other university loves talking about their alums coming back to coach than Penn State. If D'Anton Lynn is in fact the defensive coordinator, he's going to have to make over this defense. Chaz Coleman is set to hit the portal. Elliot Washington, AJ Harris now, and potentially even more players are going to follow into the portal. That's okay if Matt Campbell's able to recruit some of his former Iowa State players and other big name players that will enter in from other places. But we got to talk about the impact here because those are 3 starting caliber players that the Nittany Lions aren't going to have next season. What does it mean for Matt Campbell in year 1? That is coming up next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into that moment. You have live spreads and money lines that adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up. You can also bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. You can bet on NFL football. You can bet on college football as well. Lines are available for Penn State versus Clemson in this upcoming bowl game. Penn State is a 3.5-point underdog, plus 128 on the money line, minus 154. If you're thinking Clemson, the total is set at 48.5. If you like those lines, you can bet them over at FanDuel.com or the FanDuel app. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets. That's FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. There seems to be somewhat of an exodus that is going to be possible here with the transfer portal, and that's to be understood. James Franklin was a player's coach. He was self-described as that. So with a bunch of seniors going on to the NFL, this is both the offense and defense, but particularly on the defense. You're going to lose Denai Dennis-Sutton, Zariah Fisher, Zane Durant, Alonzo Ford, but then Chaz Coleman says he's going to put his name into the transfer portal. You have Elliot Washington, who announces early. Then you have A.J. Harris, who also announces he is going to hit the portal. And with Terry Smith returning, that kind of does complicate some things. He was, the cornerbacks coach, and that was a big point of emphasis. If he's going to be the head coach, if he's going to stay at Penn State, well, then a lot of defensive players are going to be inclined to stay at Penn State, right? Well, at least that's not trending that way. Understandable for Chaz Coleman to want to potentially go back to Ohio. That's where he's from. It was basically Penn State and Ohio State in the final days of his commitment. Penn State ultimately won. I think part of that had to do with Ohio State didn't recruit him as strongly. He's certainly not going to Virginia Tech, but I would watch for A.J. Harris and Elliot Washington to follow James Franklin to Virginia Tech. Bottom line is Matt Campbell and whoever the defensive coordinator is going to be, and Terry Smith as well, they are going to have to work overtime to rebuild this defense for 2026.
Yeah, the good thing about the secondary is the secondary was probably the deepest it's ever been in the modern era of Penn State football in terms of guys that could just flat out cover. I was always a big Elliot Washington guy. I thought he should have played more reps, especially early in the season. I thought he was one of the top 4 or 5 guys easily in the rotation. A.J. Harris, big loss. And at first today when I heard it, I was like, oh, wow. But then I'm kind of thinking back to how his playing time went through the season, and I know there was an injury.
It was a roller coaster.
But, there was the slip against Indiana. Northwestern, excuse me, yeah. And didn't really see the field much that game. And I think Terry Smith was asked about it, and was
he said he got benched. They benched him.
Exactly. So when you said a complicated thing, and you saying it kind of complicated thing with Terry Smith returning on that's what jogged my memory of that soundbite in the press conference about that. So that now I was shocked earlier, not as shocked right now as the words are coming out of my mouth. But on paper, big loss for Penn State. This was a guy talked about as one of the top cornerbacks in the country. It didn't play like that all year. So a change of scenery probably going to be good for him. It would not shock
for both sides.
Yeah, it would not shock me if he ended up at Virginia Tech. But there are guys. I mean, Penn State saw Darius Dixon come on and look really, really good. There are guys that could flat out cover in Penn State secondary, and they should be able to do things. Now, who's going to be calling those plays? That's a whole nother argument and things like that. And we might see massive amounts of turnover if all these guys want to do, they were told they're going to play man coming in, or mostly man, and then all of a sudden this is going to be a straight zone scheme. Maybe they don't want to play in that. So we could be looking at a ton of turnover, and this is just things that are, again, realities in today's world.
Well, and that's what you kind of have to watch for after that. We mentioned players like Darius Dixon. Davian Collins would be a great player to have back. You also have Zion Tracy. He was just talked about at D'Anton Lynn. So cornerbacks and just basically defensive backs overall. And I can continue. King Mac's the guy you want to build around.
Yeah, you have of all of them. Mention King Mac. That's why you got to throw him out. If he's on the secret recordings and he's talking about leadership and everything else, and he's a great talker, and he's gonna hold people accountable, I don't care what the stats are on the field. Maybe he's a little undersized. That's a guy you want in your program.
So give me King Mac. Give me a nucleus of King Mac Jameer Joseph, who actually was a rising freshman, that lot of positive reviews about him in his first season. And Darius Dixon, if you can start with those three, okay, I'm content with that. And then everybody else can kind of make their decision. Here's also the part of it as well. Iowa State secondary was really good last season. They were just injured. They were just banged up. Their two best players, who are now, if I'm not mistaken, both in the portal, in Jeremiah Cooper and Jontez Williams, they should be Penn State targets. They could come in and either bolster the depth chart or be those guys that are just, they're just going to rotate in, because that's how Penn State's always operated. I imagine Matt Campbell will continue that, where the secondary just has so many people playing that there's really no starter and backup, that they're all co-starters. And if you were able to build out a depth chart that includes those guys, so Cooper, Williams, in addition to Dixon, King Mack, and somebody like Jameer Joseph, okay, then Penn State, yeah, you're losing some starters, but honestly, the way those conversations went, Matt Campbell might have sat down with AJ Harris and said, look, you didn't do that well. You're probably going to be in a competition as a veteran guy. If you think you're better off somewhere else, I don't blame you if you want to go. And that's how these conversations go. They give you an honest assessment. And the honest assessment was a guy like AJ. It stings to lose Chaz Coleman. You know, he was comped as a future first round pick. AJ Harris was once upon a time too. But then this season was a real reality check where he just never lived up to those standards.
Yeah, because I remember asking him about, and to his credit, preseason, when I asked him about what's it like coming into a season where you're billed as one of the top 3-4 draft picks at the cornerback spot. That's something that isn't really talked about at Penn State a whole heck of a lot. And you've been called the best cornerback in the country. He goes, it doesn't really matter. He goes, every day I have to go out on the field and I have to prove it. And, you know, against some of these guys we're going to play against in the Big Ten, obviously he was referring to Oregon and Ohio State. I have to be able to go out there and prove it. Unfortunately, while at times he looked like he was proving it early in the season, late in the year, it just didn't pan out that way. Could be a multitude of reasons. Again, it just could be. It could be focus. It could be injury, because he was banged up a little bit towards the end. But at the same time, Terry Smith openly said, hey, we didn't put him in the game.
So we'll see how it continues to trend. If Penn State's going to have more departures, we've already seen just a number of guys, not too many, 5 or 6 names that have, between Joey Schlaffer entering fairly early to now AJ Harris, and more guys could in the coming days ahead of the bowl game here. So, but we'll see. Just know this, there is going to be a lot of player movement between guys that are exiting Penn State and guys that are going to be entering Penn State for the first time. And just know that that's okay. It's going to happen.
Zach, you're the host, but can I ask you a question on this podcast?
Sure. Absolutely.
Who out of the guys that so Coleman was part of the core 5 that you wanted to keep as the young guys. Who else give me 2 must keeps, one on each side of the ball, that you feel Penn State has to keep, and I just want to compare them to mine.
One on each side of the football, so we know that, AJ Harris is gone, right? I still think AJ Harris is a good football player. It might have been also, Jim Knowles' defense and everything might have been too much. But offensively, I'd say Cooper Cousins. No, actually, I'll say Andrew Rapplier, because I think that's a guy that you build around. You can't go wrong with either of them, a 1A, 1B. So somebody that's kind of that face of the offense. It's either Cooper Cousins, if you believe, the games won in the trenches, or how about a guy that can do a little bit of both with Andrew Rapplier? I'll go with Rapp as my offensive player. Defensive player, I'm kind of partial to Amari Campbell and Tony Rojas here, but I'll go Darius Dixon in the secondary, or King Mack. I know I'm naming multiple guys, but give me King Mack and Andrew Rapplier, because I think this team needs leadership above all else. Gotcha.
I was going to go with Rapplier, because I don't think Cooper Cousins is going anywhere. I just think that's a Penn State football player. And it goes back to that video that I shot of him standing in the tunnel as the team was walking off at the Orange Bowl 2 seasons now ago. I should say a year ago in January against Notre Dame. And then you mentioned it, Darius Dixon. And I'm just thinking the young core that Penn State wants to keep. All the guys you named, I think Penn State definitely wants to keep. I was just going with the young guys, and Rapplier being one, and Darius Dixon being the other on the defensive side of the ball. Got to keep Amari Campbell too. Got to keep Amari Campbell.
Find a way. It's going to be difficult. He's going to have a lot of suitors for this. It's college football, ladies and gentlemen, but we're going to have plenty of conversations around it in the not too distant future. That's going to do it for this one here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out this episode. If you are new to the show, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast for the latest around your favorite Penn State sports teams. He is Andrew Kalista, host of the Blue White Tailgate podcast. Links to his work will be down in the description. Andrew, it's always great to have you back on the show. And when the transfer portal starts ramping up, can't wait to have you back on to discuss all the departures and all the arrivals as well. So thank you for the time.
Thank you, man. And yes, I did consent to recording, so you could throw this out publicly.